I'm not sick or struck dumb, or don't you know a kick when you see one can't quit. We're not done, we're gonna kick till the next one.
Hello, fine people, and welcome to The Kick. This is a theme-scheming, web-weaving movie podcast on the Now Playing Network. I am your host, Chance Solom Pfeiffer. And today, our Vampires of America kick lifts the coffin lid on an exhilarating moment in film history. The so-called Blaxploitation era of the 1970s was a watershed time for black actors and artists, creating iconic genre movies, especially crime movies. Films like Shaft, Foxy Brown, Dolomite often define the popular memory of that era. But it was also a key moment for black horror films, and one of the chief catalysts to this slice of horror movie history, which is equal parts iconoclastic, ridiculous, and politically charged, is 1972's Blacula. What's Blacula about? I'm glad you ask. In the late 18th century, Prince Mamuwalde, played by Titanic thespian William Marshall, is on a diplomatic mission to end the slave trade, and he seeks the help of really the worst possible foreign dignitary you could imagine, that being Transylvanian nobleman Count Dracula, who not only doesn't want to help end the slave trade, but would happily curse Mamuwalde with an eternal thirst for blood. Dracula bites Mamuwalde's neck, condemns his wife, Princess Luva, to die, and leaves the prince in a coffin that will be discovered 200 years later and shipped to early 1970s LA, at which time Blacula, as Dracula literally names him, awakens and commences to biting Angelinos, some of whom definitely deserve it, and some of whom might be Tina, the reincarnation of Mamuwalde's long-dead wife. Here to discuss, I'm so happy to have him on the show. He is the author of Black Caesars and Foxy Cleopatras, A History of Blaxploitation Cinema, and the film critic for the Boston Globe. Odie Henderson, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me on.
I am jazzed that you're here, and I want to start, having read your book, by asking you, what was the first time you saw Blacula?
Well, I didn't see this in the movie theater. I would have been too young. Also, I did see some blaxploitation movies in theaters when they came out. But this was there was a TV show on Channel 9. I'm from the New York City area, and WOR-TV, which is Channel 9, they would have a show on Friday and Saturday nights called Fright Night. It was on 1 o'clock in the morning. It was horror movies, obviously. And Saturday night was the one night we were allowed to stay up late as little kids. So we got to watch a little bit of Saturday Night Live, a little bit of wrestling, and Fright Night. I come from a family of horror movie lovers. My mother loves horror movies. My aunties love horror movies. So they didn't mind letting us stay up to watch horror movies. And Blacula was one of the fixtures on Channel 9's Fright Night at this moment. They also showed Christopher Lee Dracula movies. In fact, when Christopher Lee was on Saturday Night Live, when he hosted it, he made a joke I don't think anybody got outside of New York got. He said, "Not all of my movies come on at 3 a.m. on Channel 9." And he was referring to Fright Night.
That's a real, you came by it very organically.
Oh, yeah.
I curse you with my name. You shall be Blacula.
Blacula, the Black Avenger, rising from his tomb to fill the night with horror. Blacula, Dracula's soul brother, deadlier even than he.
You know, he is a strange dude.
You're the nut that ran in front of my cab. You're the only imbecile on this street. Boy.
Blacula.
Look at man, you found, she's got to be around here somewhere. Now listen, you take your hands off of me. I don't know you.
He thirsts for your blood. He hungers for your soul. Warm young bodies will feed his hunger. Hot, fresh blood will quench his awful thirst.
Make it a Bloody Mary. Are you, into the occult?
No!
How about the, heavy stuff?
What do you think of vampires?
Vampires? I think they're possibly the most fascinating of all.
why did Blacula get its own chapter in your history of blaxploitation cinema?
Well, I wanted to give it its own chapter. I mean, it was not too difficult to figure out what I was going to devote a whole chapter to in the book and what I was going to just speak to in chapters and pieces going forward. Blacula was, and I believe, the first of the blaxploitation horror movies. Technically speaking, it was made, they were shooting it in January of 72, and it preceded a lot of the other blaxploitation horror movies like Twilight People and Blackenstein and Dr. Black and Mr. Hyde, which is also directed by William Crane, who directed Blacula. But I
Yeah.
wanted to give it a chapter because of all of the horror movies that I mentioned, it's the best one. And also was the one I had the most familiarity with, having seen it so many times as a kid and wanting to talk about some of the bigger themes in the movie that I kind of not really recognized when I was a kid. And I started to recognize when I was a teenager watching it on video. And when I was now an old man watching it to write this book, seeing just interesting they worked, how interestingly they worked blackness into this movie, into a vampire picture. And that's why I wanted to give it its own chapter. Plus, Gene Siskel of Siskel and Ebert fame, um, he gave me the title of the chapter, which is Dracula was a redneck. That's not me. That's actually a quote from
Uh-huh.
Gene Siskel's review. Gene Siskel liked it. I think it is also one of the most critically acclaimed of the blaxploitation horror movies. It also is one of the few blaxploitation movies to win an award. It won the Best Picture at the first Saturn Awards. Saturn is the horror movie and science fiction awards. This was the first winner of that award.
Didn't know it was the first one. Let's so let me then pick up on what you laid down there. Which theme of the way that it represents blackness in this horror context is most interesting to you as a writer, Odie?
Well, I think partially why Mama Walde is even in Transylvania in the first place with his wife. He has come there under the assumption that he has an ally in Count Dracula. I guess he's never read Bram Stoker's book, and he wants to stop the slave trade. And this is an interesting thing they throw into the movie, and I think William Marshall has something to do with how Mama Walde is presented and what his intentions are. And so that was interesting to me. And of course, Dracula turns on him and bites him and curses him with, his own curse, and makes him Blacula. But I thought that was very interesting. The other thing, and I didn't know this, well, I always knew that William Marshall had a great voice and he was commanding. You know, most people I know him from Pee-wee's Playhouse. He was the second king of cartoons. But I knew him from Blacula and from some other movies he made. Abby, obviously, another horror movie, blaxploitation horror movie. But what I learned was that he and Christopher Lee had a lot of things in common. The two kind of foremost players of Dracula. Christopher Lee obviously playing Dracula many, many times in this era. And William Marshall, they're both 6'5", very tall men. They both had commanding voices, and they both were opera singers.
Mm-hmm.
And Christopher Lee, he sang in The Wicker Man, obviously.
That's
Another
right.
Channel 9 staple of Fright Night, The Wicker Man.
Nice.
Butchered as hell, but it was on. And William Marshall never really got to sing. Also, William Marshall, Blacula wasn't it was one of his first movies, but he had been working for 30 years before he played Blacula. He was a known commodity.
To totally cease the slave trade? I find that unrealistic. Slavery has merit, I believe.
Merit? You find merit in barbarity?
Barbarous from the standpoint of the slave, perhaps. Intriguing and delightful from mine. I would willingly pay for so beautiful an addition to my household as your delicious wife.
Sir, are you ill?
Oh, I meant no insult, Prince. It is a compliment for a man of my station to look with desire on one of your color.
Sir, I suddenly find your cognac as distasteful as your manner. You're behaving like some animal.
Didn't you say that it was the London Sunday Times said that he was the best onstage Othello they'd ever seen up to that point? Like a
Yep.
really critically acclaimed theater actor.
Yes, he was in Carmen Jones, in the original production of Carmen Jones in the 40s, the musical that got Dorothy Dandridge her first Oscar nomination in '54. He was in The Green Pastures. In fact, The Green Pastures, incredibly racist Pulitzer Prize winning play that they made a movie out of in the '30s. That was the first thing he saw, and it made him want to act. And so he
Hmm.
wound up playing the Lord. That's the name of the character. Jesus, God, is called the Lord
Hmm.
in Green Pastures. He played that role in the '50s. He played understudy Boris Karloff and played opposite him in Peter Pan in the '50s. And he was a member of, like, I don't think it was the Negro Ensemble company, but it's certainly a member of black theater companies. So he was a stage actor, obviously with that voice, and he had been doing this for quite a long time when Blacula fell into his lap. So it's fascinating to see some of the history of some of these people. Unlike most blaxploitation films, people got their start in them, right?
Yeah.
He had come into them already with 30 years of performing under his belt. Well, 28, because he started in '44.
Hmm. Hmm. You've already made reference to Marshall's his sheer presence, his posture, his voice, the air of dignity that he brings to the Mama role. But I'd love to get into it. What are like some specific choices that you see him making in the movie that make the character indelible?
Well, I think when he is not Blacula, when he is just posing as a regular kind of African, not necessarily a prince, but certainly regal enough to make you think he's a prince, he's
Yeah.
very, very elegant. He's very sexy. He's very
Hmm.
elegant. He's sexy. He presents himself as a really, really kind of refined individual. This is not something you normally see in blaxploitation movies. Everybody's, dressed to the nines and what have you. He has more of an authoritative, almost Shakespearean air around about him. And when he's Dracula, when he's Blacula, he's pretty scary. He's a big man. And so he's quite scary. And so the movie, it's rare that you get a vampire movie, in my opinion, that's scary. I don't think vampires are particularly scary. You want to bite my girlfriend, take her. Um, but it's he does bring an air of dignity to the film, and also he's scary. So I think some of his choices, the way he carries himself, you never catch him slouching. You never catch him in a position where he looks like he's being lazy. You could see why Vanetta McGee's character is intrigued by him even after he tells her, "Hey, you're the reincarnation of my boo."
Uh-huh.
And most women would be like, "Yeah, yeah, gotta get rid of this brother." So he's very convincing. And again, he is very good at conveying both sides, an elegant side and a terrifying side.
Totally. And he's super good at the there's several club scenes where he's meeting up with Tina and the Van Helsing sort of character, Dr. Thomas, happens to be
Yes.
there. But Marshall's so good at kind of the like dramatic irony of the little Bela Lugosi moments where he's like, yes, like what if there were a vampire here right now? I wonder what he would say. That was like he's
Right.
excellent at that kind of double talk too.
It's almost like he's playing the dozens with Thomas Rasalala, that he's,
Um,
signifying. It's almost like that. He knows that I'm a vampire and I'm going to just pretty much toy with him and see what he
totally.
does and how he comes back to this. It's a very, very kind of, again, there's so many little black touches in the movie that come up that just, if you're on that wavelength, you pick up what he's doing or what is happening in there. And it's a lot of fun to just kind of look at them as, the competitors. They're also competitors for this woman.
What do you think of vampires?
Vampires? I think they're possibly the most fascinating of all.
Do you believe they exist?
Well, does the devil exist? People have believed so for thousands of years.
You seem well informed.
Oh, perhaps.
The police have a theory about these killings.
Are we to assume that they believe a vampire or some other such creature is responsible?
A vampire.
Fascinating.
However, many in the department don't believe it.
Now, I would think that to be the vampire's greatest defense.
You're right.
I also really like, the first time he comes out of the coffin and the kind of annoying couple who has bought the Dracula estate and brought the coffin to LA. When he first gets out of the coffin and bites them, Marshall really plays it with some malevolence, yes, but also like really like a man who is dying of thirst, who's kind of drunkenly stumbling toward his victims, which I thought was an interesting choice.
He's starving. And so it's a very good choice that it's not just him being violent or jumping out and attacking someone. You can almost see why he's doing it. There's a lot of empathy for Mamuwalde. I mean, there's malevolence, obviously, but the movie does kind of make you just want to take a side. And what side do you take? You understand him, even though he's the anti-hero, but there's still some empathy for him. You really do feel like he's been cursed. And so it's not like he's just doing this because he wants to. It is some psychopathic creature. It's that he has a thirst for it, you know. And some of the victims, as in all horror movies, some people die that aren't fair. Deaths in horror movies tend to be not fair. They're the ones that hit you. The photographer taking the picture, and he doesn't have an image, which goes to the Dracula lore. There are some things of Dracula lore in this movie, and some things they ignore. That he does not cast a reflection is in this movie. That dooms one person.
That's right. He does enjoy some champagne, though, which is anti-lore, but a fun choice.
Yes. I mean, he's got to have some, they're going to give him some pink champagne.
Yeah.
In 19, well, they would have if it had been a lesser Blaxploitation movie. He'd have been drinking Ripple, like Red Fox.
I was watching this and was deep into the movie, and I think it was the scene where sort of all of his victims kind of come out in that warehouse setting, but Blacula himself is not there, and my wife wandered in, and she was like, oh, which one is Blacula? And I'm like, I promise you'll know which one when he comes on screen. He's not any of the minions.
Well, I like that for 1972, and they shot this in some really interesting locations in Los Angeles. There's some guerrilla filmmaking, blacker areas of Los Angeles, like towards Watts and so on, but they also, things you can see are definitely made on the run or done on the run. Because, this is a AIP movie. You only get so much money from Sam Markoff.
Right.
And you got the same amount of money no matter who you were. And if you spent over that money came out of your pocket. So it was some interesting choices of where they shot some of this stuff and some of the things that they use for special effects or, stunts.
Sure.
Rather interesting. But they do a lot with what little they have. It's very effective as a low budget horror movie.
I'm really glad you brought this up because I think it's easy if you're not thinking about it too hard in retrospect. They're like, oh, all of these 70s movies in this era have this grit, have this lived in feel to them. But compared to something like Shaft, like even the cameras that Gordon Parks is using in Shaft he must have had quintuple the budget of this movie. So that kind of leads me to like my next question is, who's William Crane when he comes to the director's chair? He's only 23. What do we know about him and his approach to this film, Odie?
Well, he seemed to come out of nowhere, to be honest with you. At 23, it's interesting because John Singleton was 23 when he made Boys in the Hood.
Oh, yeah.
Which is 19 years after this movie. So getting someone that young, black or white, behind the camera is unusual unless you work for Roger Corman or for a very low-budget company like AIP, like Dimension, like New World Pictures, which is Corman as well. So you weren't really expected to pop out of nowhere and, he wound up in a director's chair at 23. I think he did a pretty decent job of this movie. It's the best one he's directed. He's done 4 movies. This is the best one. It's the most polished one. And I wonder if it's because, he had the AIP money. AIP, at least Corman used to give you $500,000, and that was how you made the movie. Now, Shaft, I think they made Shaft for $1.5 million.
Okay.
Because remember, MGM was doing worse than AIP in 1971. They're about to go bankrupt.
Good context.
So Shaft, speaking of, we talked about Hackman a second ago before he came on. The French Connection and Shaft were being shot at the same time in New York in 71, and they were both written by Ernest Tidyman. And in January of 1971, MGM and Fox were going to merge. Because MGM was going bankrupt because Kirk Kerkorian was stripping it for his casino. And Fox was going bankrupt because they made shitty big budget musicals nobody went to see, like Hello Dolly.
Yeah.
And they were going to merge in 71. And Zanuck had to go on the record and say that I'm not merging. Then he fired his kid, Richard, who winds up in Blaxploitation later. Um, and so they didn't have a lot of money for Shaft to make it. And the fact that Shaft made so much money that it saved MGM and the French Connection made so much money that it saved Fox, was very interesting. But yeah, you got Gordon Parks behind the camera. I mean, this is a guy that was taking photographs for 20 something years. That you would think, if nothing else, he knows how to frame a shot.
Oh my God. Yeah, for sure. I spoilers for Blacula, folks. If you don't want to know about the end of this 53-year-old film, skip ahead a little bit. But Odie, I of course want to talk to you about the end of the movie because I was thinking about it in the prologue of your book as you're kind of searching around for like how to define this era that's been argued about and defined so many ways, and like what's your definition. And you talk about this coworker of yours from a video store when you were coming up, and one of the things that he said sort of like typified this era of 70s films, even with some of the ugly stereotypes or just movies playing on stereotypes because they are exploitation films.
Right.
Your coworker was like, but we win in the end. And that to him is what like lent them such appeal. And then I was like, but that doesn't apply to Blacula. And I wonder, or at least it doesn't literally apply, considering that Blacula gives up on life with the loss of his love. Does that ending to you, does it make the movie more interesting that there was the space for that pure tragedy of an anti-hero in a story like this? How do you feel about it?
Well, as a kid, I was profoundly disturbed by it.
Yeah.
As a kid, it was the one thing that really scared me about the movie was that he gave up and he went out. You never see that in a horror movie. Monsters do not surrender.
Mm-hmm.
They don't. And there's a level of Greek tragedy, and you have someone who is as verbally and vocally sonically brilliant as this Shakespearean actor. You give him an ending that is somewhat Shakespearean or Greek. He could play this Greek tragedy. The line he says is that won't be necessary. When Thalamus Rassilal is going to stake him, he says that won't be necessary. And then he kind of moves him out of the way, and he goes out into the sun and fries himself. And the concept of winning at the end, which is what T was saying about Coonskin, the movie that I was talking about, that we tried to keep from him because it was so racist, and he was such a militant black person. And I mean, it's racist on purpose. Ralph Bakshi is doing all the stuff he's doing in that movie on purpose. But we were afraid that, this guy was going to burn the store down because we had this video in it that was just so freaking out there and so full of black stereotypes. But if you look at it from the perspective of Greek tragedy or just tragedy in general, Blacula does win at the end because he's been cursed for 200 years. And the element of him losing this woman who looks like his lost love and could possibly be a reincarnation, he has nothing else to live for.
Tina. My lovely, lovely Tina. What is left for this cursed creature? His only reason for living has been taken away.
And the fact that he basically liberates himself from this curse, there's a very, very poignant thing about this. I am freeing myself from the shackles of, in a lot of ways, white supremacy. By doing this, I'm going out on my own terms. And it's still sad, and we're not promoting suicide or anything here. But at the end of the day, first of all, he's already dead. So it just seems so poignant to me. And I think it bothered me so much as a kid because I was kind of rooting for him. And if he'd gotten killed, they staked him like they staked Christopher Lee so many times, I'd be able to live with that. But this was something that I didn't understand as a kid. I'm seeing it's like 5 years old, 6 years old.
Yeah.
This is an ending that's way above the level of a child being able to process it. So it profoundly disturbed me as a kid that he did this. And then when I saw it, at the video store and I rented it years later, I kind of got it. I understood, I'm tired and I have to just let go.
Yeah.
Now, of course, he doesn't stay dead long because they made a sequel, but that's another story.
We're talking lots about Momo and the Marshall performance. And I have to say, as I was like imagining slightly different versions of Blacula, I was like, could this movie actually have like 50% more Momo Walde? Like every time it went to the Dr. Thomas, Lieutenant Peters lab, police station procedural things, I was just like, can we please get me William Marshall back on screen ASAP? But I was curious, are there components on the Van Helsing side of the story that you stick up for? Or do you think that Marshall is where you want to be too as the viewer?
Oh yeah, I know. I think the scariest scene in the movie doesn't have William Marshall in it at all. Elijah Cook Jr., as someone who loves noir as much as I do. In fact, I'm wearing a Noir City t-shirt right now, and there's a Noir City poster behind me on the wall.
Cool.
I've gone to Noir City Eddie Murray's Festival since 2006. I am a noirista. Noir is my favorite genre of movie. Elijah Cook Jr. is the bad guy in a lot of these movies, and he plays the mortician. And he goes to get the phone, and the taxi driver is arising out of this, out of her dead slumber. Now she's been bitten by Blacula. And he turns and she comes running in slow motion. Now, the slow motion thing wasn't actually an accident. That wasn't supposed to be shot that way. It
Oh,
was a
really?
mistake. But when they saw how creepy it looked, they kept it. And I think that scene, I've done another podcast on Blacula, a podcast called Old Movies for Young Stoners, where we talked about Blacula and Darktown Strutters, a movie that you definitely need to smoke weed before you watch.
Okay.
Darktown Strutters. And everybody was in agreement that that scene is actually freaking terrifying. That she goes running toward him. And so I stick up for the mortician scenes of Elisha Cook Jr. I'll also stick up for the fact that this isn't a movie where everybody's so stupid they're not going to believe anything. When the body has no blood in it, they assume that there's a vampire. So you don't have to go through all of what a lot of horror movies do, where they prolong the agony, where no one believes that this is a vampire. They kind of hit it pretty quickly. Because number one, they don't have a lot of money. Number two, they don't have a lot of time. So I appreciated that. There could be more Mama Walde, but having seen Scream, Blacula Scream, I will say be careful what you wish for.
Ah, there you go. Yeah, that scene that you're talking about of the attack in the morgue, and it's Kitty Lester as Juanita.
Yes.
It is there. It's so interesting that you say it was accidental because it has that like lightning in a bottle, dreamlike. You couldn't pace her strides that way if you tried, kind of feeling to it. Other than the incredible slow motion hallway sequence, do you have any other favorite low budget filmmaking tricks in this movie? Any moments come to mind?
I love when he turns into a bat.
Sure.
This type of thing I love any vampire movie. I love when they turn into a bat.
What do you like about it?
Because it's so fake looking.
Sure.
Like, you get even Fright Night, which is a great vampire movie.
Totally.
When you get the bat, it still looks like shit.
Yeah, how many times have we seen that, I guess, in the history of Hollywood movies, and has it ever looked good?
And it's always a bat on the string. You can always see the string. Even in Blacula, you can see the bat is on a string.
For sure.
I think they're doing this on purpose now. You expect to see the bat on the string.
Yeah. One thing that dawned on me is when Mama Walde he's freshly landed in LA. He's running after Tina. She's dropped her purse. And he gets hit by the cab. He's never seen a car before. And he just he totally shakes it off and keeps going about his business. How do you think
that's why he shakes it off?
Okay. There you go. You answered my question. It's like, well, I don't know what that is, so I'm just going to keep going.
Well, I don't know what it is, and it didn't hurt, so fuck it.
I love it. This got me thinking too. So you brought up Christopher Lee. This is the same year as Dracula AD 1972.
Yes.
Can you imagine a version of Blacula that is more of a like? You have just a hint of it because you got the dude at the club who keeps being like, that is one strange dude. But can you imagine a version of this movie that is more of kind of like a man out of time comedy?
Not with William Marshall. Not that William Marshall couldn't be funny, because he could be funny. Been in other things. He's in a great episode of Benson where he plays Death. The Benson, the sitcom.
Uh-huh.
Every 80s sitcom has to have a one-off where the main character meets someone that is probably Death.
Yeah.
And in Benson, it's William Marshall. and Benson and William Marshall play a game for Benson's soul. And it's actually a fascinating episode simply because you got two really good actors, Robert Guillaume, a stage actor, William Marshall, a stage actor, and they take it seriously. And it works really, really well. But I don't think it would work with William Marshall. I don't think you can get a love at first bite out
Yeah.
of this particular type of casting. Now, I mean, if you're going to go that direction, you need to get Flip Wilson. We're talking
Okay.
about this someone who is time appropriate. Flip Wilson as a vampire would be interesting. If you're going to go that kind of more, not necessarily campy direction, more comedic direction, you would need someone like that. I don't think you couldn't really buy Marshall, even at his funniest, as someone like Flip Wilson or and Richard Pryor as a vampire would be hilarious, but I don't think he'd ever bite anybody.
Fair. Um, Mamuwalde's combat move of choice, which he does many times in this movie, is the backhand. He has just a prodigious backhand.
Oh yeah,
Do you think that holds any particular significance?
yeah, it's pimpy.
Okay.
You gotta. My guess is that it's they put that in, had him slap people like that to almost make him seem pimp-like. I mean, he's dressed, got a cape,
True.
and then so on and so forth. I mean, I don't know if that's intentional or just I'm reading into it,
Yeah.
but he's giving a backhand to a lot of people, and I mean, he's a big dude, so I certainly won't. I'd rather get slapped by Mama Walden than punched in the face by Mama Walden. Let me put it that way.
Fair.
I think that may be why, or he's just too elegant to get his hands dirty. So he's gonna slap you.
I think that makes total sense for the character too. He like all of these people are beneath him, whether he's Blacula or Mamuwalde.
You know what? What about the concept of it being a duel type thing? Since he comes from the 1800s, when you wanted to duel somebody, you slapped them, right?
Yes.
With a glove.
Take that glove
And you
off.
gave him a backhand slap with a glove.
Yep.
So maybe it's a duel thing.
Yeah. I like it.
I never thought of this until you brought it up.
I'm glad I can. I'm sure you have thought about Blacula almost as much as any living person, so I'm glad I could bring up something to the table. That's great. Wait, so do you think that Tina? This might be an annoying plot question. Is she actually Luva or total coincidence? What's your read, Odie?
Well, I mean, every vampire movie has this plot.
Yeah.
The woman that looks like his love. And she could be a descendant. I mean,
Sure.
I look like several of my ancestors in some fashion. I wouldn't look exactly like them, but I don't got Mama Waldy chasing me down.
Uh-huh.
But I think they had to deal with vampire lore, so they're going to add this in, and also the fact that one of the writers of this movie is a woman gives you stronger female characters than you would normally find in a horror movie. When you think about it, I mean, before we get to kind of Final Girls and that kind of thing, the slasher era, this is still before Black Christmas, 2 years before Black Christmas, and before a lot of these movies where you have a final girl. There's some agency to both Denise Nicholas's character and to Vanetta McKee's character. They're written smartly. They're not written as just damsels in distress running around screaming. Even a taxi driver is written, she's a typical lady taxi driver. There's a whole subgenre of movies where lady taxi drivers are in these characters. You got even in musicals like Nancy Walker is the cab driver that's trying to jump what's his name's Bones and on the town, and she has this kind of brassy, where you going, Mac, kind of thing. So I think that the female characters in this movie are written better than in a lot of horror movies because one of the screenwriters is a woman.
In your book, you noted that William Marshall had many, many notes on the script. And I'm curious, do we know how he felt about this movie, pre-production, or even just about his notoriety for it later?
Well, when they asked him to make the movie, he said, "You must be out of your mind." And then he had all these notes, and I think AIP took a couple of them because the whole element of Mama Waldy speaking Swahili and explaining some African art to Vanetta McGee and Denise Nicholas, I think that's all William Marshall added all that stuff to it. So there are a couple of things. He had the same problem with Abby, where Abby is the Black exorcist, and so he wanted to add a lot of African stuff to it, and he had what's his name who directed this? The guy that ran mid-century pictures. It'll come to me. But the director of the movie was like, eh. But they did actually do some things in Abbey that I think William Marshall had to do something to do with. And again, it goes back to African history or African languages. And the exorcist, his exorcism in Abbey is not a Christian exorcism. He's opening up some, serious African, religion on Abbey.
There you go.
I think that came from him because he was a scholar of African languages, of African art, and of specific tribes, the Yoruba tribe, and so on, that he talks about both in Abbey and in Blacula. So I think
Yeah.
those elements came from William Marshall, but they pretty much probably said to him, "Look, brother, we only got so much money. It's an exploitation movie. We got to put some stuff in here. People are going to want to see some violence and whatever." But I mean, some of that stuff I think did get in. And he was actually fine with the movie. He was happy. There's an article in the Los Angeles Times where he talks about that when he made the movie, after he saw it, he didn't hate it. And of course, he did a sequel, which is inferior, but does give us him and Pam Grier together.
Yeah, that's my next question. So do you have any, it sounds like, hey, it gives us Pam Grier, a little more William Marshall, but otherwise not great, in your opinion, Scream, Blacula, Scream?
Well, Scream, Blacula, Scream makes Mema Waldy more of the villain.
Yeah.
So it takes this also it removes the poignancy of the ending of Blacula.
Yeah, he doesn't want to be there anymore.
Well, he definitely doesn't want to be in it this time. He's really pissed off this time. And he has a Renfield who's played by Richard Lawson. And Renfield is like this jive ass, almost JJ from Good Times kind of character until William Marshall dresses him down. And it's like, you're my man. You're not going to act like, some jive turkey. You're going to act dignified. And it also adds elements of voodoo and a bunch of other stuff into it. On the same token, Pam Grier would have made a damn good Scream Queen. She's good in this movie. The two of them, they're definitely easy to look at. And you can buy their romance a little bit more. But Mama Waldy is less, in my opinion, less of a character Scream, Blacula, Scream. This is more of let's capitalize on the success of Blacula. Blacula made $3 million at the box office, by the way. It was in the top 20 of 1972. So it made a lot of money. So and it cost, like I said, $500,000, and it made $3 million. So this is 1972 money where movies cost $1.
Right.
So I think capitalizing on Scream on the Blacula craze and making Scream Blacula Scream, you can see it's an inferior product, even though it is written by the same two people who wrote Blacula.
I guess I won't call it a bone to pick, Odie, and I might regret this. You have a great chapter in your book about the top 10 songs from Blaxploitation movies. And I was wondering, why does Across 110th Street not make the top 10 cut?
I gave it an honorary mention, if I remember correctly.
I was reading it earlier, and I did not see a mention. Maybe I missed it.
Now that you think about it, I think it may have gotten cut. But I do give Across 110th Street the song its props in the chapter.
Right.
I know why. I know the rules of my list.
Yes.
Obviously, the rules of my list eliminated Across 110th Street. That was the reason why it's not there. That's the reason why it's not there. But I do give it its props in its chapter. It does get, I mentioned that it's a great song, and it is definitely, it would be, if all, by not throwing those rules in, it definitely would have been there.
Because the version that plays in the movie is not the
it's
studio
not
track,
the version
which is
that
way
you're
better.
famous with, that you're familiar with. And that happens a lot. And not just in Blaxploitation movies and movies in general. Valley of the Dolls, the Dionne Warwick version you hear in the opening credits of Valley of the Dolls is not the version that is famous.
Right.
And, she didn't sing Alfie at the beginning, Alfie. Alfie in the movie was sung by Cher. A lot of people don't know that.
There you go. It was I'm just giving you a hard time. That was one of my favorite
chapters. No,
I
wanted people to give me a hard time. I gave myself a hard time because I was kind of irritated by the choice that I made to kind of present this, but otherwise I would never. I had 3 pages. I was already pushing it.
Yep. Yeah.
So I was like, you know what? if I can't buy the rights to any of these songs, because I don't know if you know about this about books, you can't quote lyrics in books unless you pay for the rights
What?
to the song.
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
I didn't know it, I didn't know any of that. A lot of the editor was like, "You can't afford all this shit. It's got to come out." I
Wow.
see because if you write an essay, like if I write an article in the Boston Globe, and I decide I'm going to quote, across 110th Street, like the
Yeah.
first stanza of it, I can do that.
Okay.
But I can't quote more than two lines
Oh,
of
not in a
Across 110th
book.
Street in the book, because if I do, they make you pay for it. Now I try to get around that. I try
Sure.
to like paraphrase, like take one line from one place to the other place. They were on to me. Like, now you can't do that, buddy. You got to buy it.
All right.
So
Here's a
that's
key.
that's
Here's a
why.
key question though. If you put the word shaft exclamation point in quotes, does that count as a lyric or no?
I didn't try that. I do have it. They say that Cash Chef's a bad mother. Shut your mouth. But that's only one line. So I
Yeah.
got away with that.
Okay, one of the last segments here for you, Odie. It's called Truth or Trivia, and the guest gets to
Okay.
pick whether they would like to try and answer a movie-related question truthfully, or they want to go for a related trivia question. What would you rather do?
The cocky dude in me wants to say trivia question, but I guarantee it'll be a question probably one question I don't know the answer to. But the hell with it. You know what? I came to play. Let's
I
do a
love
trivia
it. I
question.
love the confidence. Okay, so as you have already alluded to, William Marshall plays King of Cartoons in Pee-wee's Playhouse. He replaced in season 1 another actor who was in several Blaxploitation films. Do you know who he replaced on as King
Oh
of
my
Cartoons?
God, I should know this. The guy he died.
He
That was the
did.
reason why William Marshall was there. Oh, come on, it's not Julius Harris. That's not him. Oh my God, I can see him. Ah, think Odie. Ah, and it wasn't Thanos Rasalala either. But it was someone in that vein, someone like him.
I can tell you got into gradually bigger and bigger parts over the course. So he has like almost nothing part in Cotton Comes to Harlem. He's a slightly bigger part in Across 110th Street, and I think he's fifth billed in Gordon's War.
Oh God.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's all
I'm
right.
going to go
It's all
through.
right. We
No,
still
no,
admire.
no. It's actually the funny thing is that I can see him and I just can't remember what his name is. All right, I surrender like Blacula. That won't be necessary. I shall walk into the sun now. Who
Climbs up
was
the
it so I can kick my
stairs
own ass?
as I tell you his name was Gilbert Lewis.
Oh my God.
You know what? I can tell you really cared, Odie, and that's
No,
admirable.
but the thing is that I should have known the answer to this simply because I watched Pee-wee's Playhouse.
Sure.
And I mentioned earlier he was the second, so it wasn't like I was completely ignorant of this
Indeed.
fact.
I thought I watched this great clip of William Marshall as King of Cartoons where he's like, I have something for you, Pee-wee. And Pee-wee goes, I hope it's not a fruitcake. And he goes, no, no, no. It's 2 fruitcakes.
Yeah, it's the Christmas special, which is
Oh my
absolutely
God.
fantastic because
So funny.
Grace Jones sings the only version of Little Drummer Boy I can tolerate. It's my least favorite Christmas. People talk about that at Wonderful Christmas Time.
Yeah.
I can deal with that. The Little Drummer Boy makes me want to kill people.
It's really like a itch you can't scratch in the back of your head.
Well,
It's horrible.
and Neil Diamond did an incredibly awful version of it. Come, they told me, pom,
Yeah.
ram, pom, pom, pom. It was awful. And so Grace Jones does this crazy, like, Grace Jones version that
Yeah.
skirts the censor
Yep.
of her doing the Little Drummer Boy in that Pee-wee's Playhouse Christmas special. And the running joke is he keeps getting a fruitcake from everybody that shows up.
I love it. Yeah, melodically, Little Drummer Boy is going nowhere. So you as an artist have to do something else interesting.
And she turned it into a Grace Jones like disco at the gay bar song.
Hell yeah. Odie, my last one for you. So this whole series is leading up to Ryan Coogler's Sinners in April in terms of vampires in America. What's your current temperature on Sinners? Are we looking forward to it?
Well, I just walked past yesterday when I was at a Working Man, a gigantic poster of Sinners, the giant floor stand thing that they have. I'll follow Ryan Coogler anywhere.
Yeah.
He is one of the few directors that has batted 1,000 with me. And Creed was my #1 movie of the year. And Black Panther was in my top 10. Fruitvale Station was in my top 10. So, I'm willing to follow him anywhere, but I'm afraid that this might be the movie that he finally falls. But I'm looking forward to. I love horror movies. You got a good cast. You got Michael B. Jordan. It looks creepy.
Yeah.
I'm willing to trust Ryan Coogler
Wait, why are you afraid though?
because at some point you got to mess up.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And this is something not necessarily out of his zone, but certainly something different.
Right.
And if he can do Black Panther, he clearly can do a vampire picture. But this is not like Jordan Peele doing a vampire picture. When
Right.
you could expect that I'm going to expect something, a horror expert to do something like this. So it's uncharted territory, at least in my mind, for Coogler. So I'm wondering how it's going to go. What is he actually going to do? And are we completely sure that this is explicitly a vampire movie like Blade?
Yeah.
People forget about Blade. Blade, the first Marvel movie, by the way, that made money. Blade. So if
Uh-huh.
you want to blame anybody for Marvel hell, you got to blame Wesley Snipes.
Yeah, it's fair. Does Coogler have the horror knack? We'll have to see.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. I mean, it's one of my most anticipated movies of the year, and I don't have very many this year.
There you
So
go.
it was supposed to come out in February, but they pushed it. It was April 18th. So I'm looking forward to it. And I just hope and pray that it's good.
Me too. I mean, the way I organize this show, and when I get to the end of like an 8-film run, like I need the capping film to be good. If it's mediocre, it kind of feels like an anticlimactic journey. So we're all banking on it.
So we're all going to have take a leap of faith with Ryan Coogler and Killmonger. Yeah.
There we go. Odie, I thank you so much for your time and your expertise. Thanks for talking. Anything you want to plug on your way out the door?
No, just my book, Caesars and Foxy Cleopatras, A History of Blaxploitation Cinema. You can get it anywhere. It's on sale at some places. And if you like my melodious voice, number one, you're crazy. And number two, you can hear me read the book myself. If you don't want to read it, I did the audiobook as well.
Oh, cool. All right, I got to download.
So you get to hear me imitate Diana Ross, among other people.
All
and
right.
Abby. I get to imitate Abby, the devil, the demon that's inside of Abby.
The author does his own impressions.
I do my own impressions, but they would not allow me to sing. I tried to. Well, actually, if you do get the audiobook, I get away with singing one lyric, and they didn't make me take it out.
Okay.
Because me singing it made it twice as bad, because now I had to deal with the music and the lyrical part.
Yeah. How in key do you have to be before they start charging you royalties? Yeah,
oh, you can sing out of key as much as you want to, but I'm in key on this little line that I sing. So
very
definitely,
nice.
I did musical theater, so I know exactly what notes I ain't hitting.
There you go. Well, thank you again, Odie. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much.